Let's talk all about AI in business. It's hosted by Brent Muller. Welcome to the Future Proof Podcast.
Hi, and welcome to the latest episode of the Future Proof Podcast. I'm your host, Brent Muller. I'm joined today by Ben Narasin from Tenacity VC. Ben, thank you for spending some time with us.
Hey, looking forward to it.
Yeah. All right. So, Ben, let's start with your background. Everybody wants to hear your journey, and let's start there.
Sure. I mean, it's been a long one. I started my first business when I was 12. I had my first job when I was 11. I worked for 25 cents an hour in credit. And I basically became an entrepreneur at 12 and never stopped. I spent 21 years, 25 years as an entrepreneur. And that culminated in my starting one of the first .coms in 1993 in New York City, which I took public in 99. So that's the most relevant of my pieces of the entrepreneurial journey. Then we moved west, ended up in California about 21 years ago. And I saw this gap in the market between angel and venture. Angel was small and slow. Venture was big and extremely narrowly focused. And so in between those two were smart people with great ideas that didn't need much money to get started. As you remember, the cost of starting a business had plummeted. I mean, the internet alone took the cost of starting a business down to like nickels plus a connectivity through, you could have an AOL dial up and be in business. So, I wanted to cover that category, and I started what ended up being one of the first two institutional seed funds in 2007, 2008. So I did that for about 8 years, had some phenomenal founders have great outcomes. Lending Club, Renault LaPlanche, largest tech IPO of the decade. Parker Conrad, Zenefits, fastest growing SaaS company of all time. They both raised at $5.5-ish billion valuations in the same year. And back then, that was a big deal. By the way, they both got fired, and I've funded both of their new businesses, and both of their new businesses are doing better. They're great, great, great founders.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's always nice when you can make money on something where you lost money before. But during that process of being a seed investor in an era where there was not much in the way of seed, I got to know over 300 VCs because it was very important to me to be able to help my entrepreneurs think about who the next investor was. When I had a public company, I had a board I did not enjoy. So I was very focused on helping entrepreneurs think about how do I craft an optimal board to have the best possible outcome and experience. And so a lot of those VCs I got to know when we had a great year came to call and said, hey, maybe you should be doing Series A, B, and C. So I ended up doing traditional venture capital for about 7 years, mainly at NEA, New Enterprise Associates. For those that don't know, has traditionally been the largest venture firm in the world. Great shop. But at one point, even though I was there doing later stage deals, I was still doing seed, and I love seed. And so when they discontinued the seed practice, it was like, well, I can make good money doing later stage, but it's not a lot of fun. So I pitched them on doing an NEA branded seed fund, and they said, well, you're good at this. Why don't we just spin you out and you can do your own fund, and we'll help you with the first check and some intros. So that is exactly what I did about 3 years ago. So Tenacity started roughly 3 years ago. It's a $60 million venture fund. We fund, seed and occasionally pre-seed, right? $1 to $3 million checks, and are typically, their most active investor. We don't typically take board seats, but I spend a lot of time with my entrepreneurs. And, being connected to the entrepreneur is a super important part of this. And I don't want to waste 25 years of pain. And that's what being an entrepreneur for 25 years gives you. 25 years of pain, resulting in, if you're good and lucky and work incredibly hard, liquidity, which is awesome. Right. But I was literally just sitting last night with a guy in our fire pit who was an entrepreneur in the decades that I was, the 90s and the bubble. Right. And now he's, working for a fund and doing fine. But he was commenting on sort of the spread between outcomes. So, there's a variety of possibilities when you start down the entrepreneurial journey from zero to wow.
No kidding. And so what is it, Ben, that draws you to seed and pre-seed?
Well, one of the learnings I had was when COVID hit, I reached out to all the founders I've been involved with. And I was amazed at how little feedback one of my later stage founders was interested in hearing. And this was a founder who had a pretty finite amount of experience, but he had raised a lot of money at high valuations, and that gave him a confidence that he must be right in his thinking. And I'm like, well, I've lived through a lot. I mean, I started a company on Black Monday, but he wasn't really interested in hearing that. What I learned is that when you do late stage investing, entrepreneurs will say a lot of things, but at the end of the day, what they really want is the highest possible valuation and an investor that doesn't bug them. Seed entrepreneurs actually crave insight and input. Now, it's not my job to tell people what to do. I am not that type of board member. And I think those sort of board members are actually terrible. I don't think they understand their job. I, however, am going to provide you with stories and experiences that I've had that may or may not influence how you think about something. You do not need to follow my advice, but you do need to at least listen and think about whether it impacts your thought process. And there is nothing more rewarding than being able to give an entrepreneur who's called you with a question a experience that helps them change their vision of the future in a way that can be material to their outcome. That is awesome. So that's super positive. There's nothing worse than watching somebody drive straight for a cliff and them refusing to hear your explanation of how you drove off a cliff and killed everybody in the car. And they're like, no, it's different now, Ben. Like, really? The sun doesn't rise and the water's not wet and air isn't what I breathe. I didn't know all those things had changed. But I've been on both sides. By the way, I've been on both sides in seed as well. But the chance that you actually have the ability to help, to have impact, to make a difference, that's awesome.
That is really a great perspective. And I haven't been in the late stage, but definitely the pre-seed and I totally get what you're saying. And that makes a lot of sense. And I do think the more open that entrepreneurs are to listening to that advice, like you said, the more, it's the whole reason why you would want some sort of a mentor or a board is to make sure that you don't steer off the cliff. Way too many do.
Sorry to interrupt you, but my favorite Stolen sayings, which I think you'll enjoy, is firm on vision, flexible on path. I need every entrepreneur I fund to have a northern light they're navigating towards. But if they believe that the map they drew the day before they started the business is the only map they can follow and refuse to change, that's just, that's a recipe for disaster. And, it's a very rare, occasionally someone will say, like, will you be my mentor? And I'm like, I don't really even know how to answer that. You can always, I only have two rules. One rule is I have to see you once a month. You can see me anytime you want. And the other is I'll help you raise your Series A across those 300 plus VCs I've gotten to know if I think you're ready, not if you think you're ready. But what I find is for the most part, they call you when there's something they believe you have expertise in and they want to learn from it. The best entrepreneurs don't need me around. They will do a phenomenal job without me. However, they might do a little bit better with me. And it's that incremental, it's sort of like if you watch Silicon Valley, there's the time when the big nerd is trying to convince the sales guy that runs the company that his sales team should sell this new thing. And he's like, my sales guys can't sell that. Why not? It's hard. I thought you said your sales guys were the best sales guys in the world. They are. The best sales guys in the world want to sell things that are easy. Yes, we could sell a hard thing and convert 1 out of 100, but they'd rather sell the easy thing and convert 12 out of 100. Yes. You want to help the best get even better because you've lived their life and you've seen their journey firsthand. And so maybe you can help them avoid a misstep or emphasize something that's doing well. It's just, and when it works, wow, that's great. I've had there's about 30 video testimonials on my LinkedIn page of entrepreneurs that have said, this is why you should work with Ben, and this is why we like Ben. 2 of them said, our company only exists because of him, because I caught something or was helpful in one very, very important time that changed the trajectory or literally in one case saved the company's life. That's rare. I've funded 180 companies in 18 years, so 2 is not a big number. But the fact that happens,
but they're meaningful.
Yeah. And it's quite compelling when they're the ones saying that to me. It's like, wow, there's plenty of examples where, by the way, because entrepreneurs are fascinating. They're super smart people. And sometimes I remember instances where I'd give an entrepreneur an idea and it changed their trajectory. And then 5 years later, I'm like, oh, can you write me a little letter that says, Ben was awesome. He told us about this and that's where we went. And instead they come back and they say, this is literally a quote, Ben was the first person to recognize our vision of X. And I'm like, dude, I handed you that, gift wrapped it. It is what it is. It doesn't matter if he gets the credit. I'd rather see them succeed.
Yeah. Well, and that's the game, right? But it's so funny that you're saying this because, I've talked to a lot of entrepreneurs and there's so many that, before they find someone like you and go after, seed round or funding of any juncture or type, they're hesitant, right, to get that advisory board, right, set up or just somebody to bounce those ideas off. And it baffles me because and again, I've made the mistakes myself, so I know firsthand, and I have the scars, right, of being hard-headed. And so to me, I wish I could tell more young or startup entrepreneurs to find someone like you to bounce those ideas because it'll save them so much time and headaches.
It's tricky though, because, one, how do you know? I'm a very trusting person because I have not lied since I was a teenager. But I will tell you this, if you screw me, I will spend the rest of my life trying to hurt you. But my list of people that I'm that angry with is 4 people long. And one of them is a very famous VC that runs a big fund that's famous around here that I'm still angry at from 1994. And I will get over it literally a day after I die. I hold on for a very long time because when you're trusting and someone violates that trust, it's just incredibly painful.
Oh, that's a big deal.
The flip side is there's plenty of people that aren't trusting because they've been hurt before. and they took that too serious. And so it is often hard, one, for people to trust, two, for them to figure out who to trust. So as an example, I have all kinds of issues with Y Combinator, but I funded, a bunch of their companies. And I was talking to one of the people, and they're like, the biggest problem is we have all these smart people giving us advice, and every one of them gives us a different point of advice. It's like if you have 6 people that are telling you 6 different things and they're all smart, I often say to entrepreneurs, look, there are 3 sources of counsel. There's experience, generally valuable, but needs to be current day validated. Sometimes things
that's good.
questionable, but dig into where it comes from, and then you can decide how much you care. And then hearsay, dangerous. There is an entire tier, particularly of younger VCs that want to look smart, but have no wisdom. People fail sometimes to, like, I'm a D&Der. I still play. We just played a month ago. There's a difference between intelligence and wisdom. You're born with intelligence. You're born with the capacity to learn a certain amount, and that is supposedly never going to change. The user knows a different thing. Wisdom comes from getting hit in the face with a virtual sledgehammer and having to get back up and fight through it. That's where you actually learn, and that's what you want to share. But there are people out there that read some blog post and say, oh, yeah, I know what you should do here. Zuck, blah, blah, blah. Like, I didn't know you were an investor in Facebook. Oh, I wasn't. But you know Zuck personally? No. But you got exposed to this decision he made 15 years ago. How? Oh, I was reading about it online. Yeah, not useful to me. I don't need it. I also can read crap online and not know if it's true. So hey, guess what? I watched The Social Network. Am I really going to have a conversation about what it took for, what's his name, to convince him he should be the president of his company for a short period of time and remove the word the? Do I even know if any of that's accurate? No. So I think it's incumbent on entrepreneurs to diligence their investors and their advisors, because there's a cost. It's a cost of time. It's a cost of some equity. And if you trust the wrong person, I have been in situations, whether it's like I judge a lot of startup competitions, I've been on a bunch of boards, and I've watched other investors, it's rare, but it happens, give horrific advice. I remember I was judging a startup competition, and there was this woman, and she spewed out all this stuff. It's irrelevant that she's a woman. It just happened in my memory that I can picture her. And I was like, wow. And that when it came to me, I was like, I've never done this. I don't mean any disrespect to this other judge, but I actually think that would be a horrible thing for you to do as a company. I think that would endanger you in a material way. And I think you guys should find time later to figure out where that advice came from, because that scares me a lot. It's like, I remember there was this guy once, and he's like, yeah, you should go to the Gates Foundation. They're really big on this. Okay. Do you know the Gates Foundation? You introduced me? No. Well, what does that do for me?
Right.
Wow, thanks. Oh, the Gates Foundation is focused on malaria? I did not know. I mean, come on, man. But people, I can talk a lot, but I'm going to talk from what I've learned.
Yeah.
So,
so it's coming from a good place to steer them in the right direction. And what you're saying is some people just like to make themselves seem smart, but the advice, if you don't dig into where it came from and take it, right, it's at your own peril.
Bad advice can be very, very dangerous. And if I don't know, I will tell you. Hey, there's nothing wrong with saying I don't know. What? Like, I was given a perfect set of knowledge in the number of years I've lived on this planet? Absolutely not. If you're building a natural gas company to do liquefied natural gas, which you're going to ship in blimps, all right, fine, whatever. Do I have a point of view? No. Do I know how blimps work? Vaguely. Do I know anything about liquid natural gas? Not really. So if I say, oh, you know what you should do? Anything I say you should immediately discount, because I know nothing about the industry or the transportation mechanisms. But there are plenty of people that always want to give you an answer. No, that's not. It's like, you know what? I actually don't know anything about liquid natural gas, so I'm probably not the right person to ask. Let's move on. That's a safe answer. But a lot of people, it's like, I had a friend at NEA Forest Basket, and he's literally the most point-wise intelligent human being that I think I know, certainly in venture. Just outrageously smart guy. Quiet guy, doesn't talk a lot. But I will tell you this, if you say an acronym he doesn't know, he's going to ask you what it means. Most people won't, because they don't want to look dumb. He is absolutely not dumb. He's incredibly smart, but he's not interested in your random, well, this is, we're resourcing all of this with XYZWT protocol. Well, what's that? We made that up. It's just this thing we do, whatever. Like, entrepreneurs also often want to look smart, and there's no way quicker to look dumb than to use a bunch of buzzwords that you don't like. It's just, not interested. Let's move on. Keep it simple. Explain it in English. Tell me what you're doing. Help me understand. Like, simplicity. I'll make a last point about this. Einstein once said, if you can't explain a complex problem simply, it's because you don't understand it well enough. So
that's 100% true. And you know what's funny about that over the years, Ben, to piggyback on that a little bit, is that my co-founder and I have kind of come up with a frame. Like, we started with the radical candor framework, right? Just so we could actually have real conversations. But to your point, the other thing that we did is paused conversations to say, let's make sure we're having common language, right? Because you might think something means one thing, and if I say something means another, we get crossed in our, in our talking points. And so to me, what you're talking about, I give your friend a lot of credit, because I think that has to happen.
And there's like, you remember when I was saying experience is valuable, but you need to current day it?
Yeah.
There's things aren't eternal. And a hack today is no longer a hack once other people figure it out. And so something that worked for one party doesn't necessarily always work for another. And this is why you always have to do the extra research. It's like doing diligence as an investor. Yeah. So as an example, I had a company in the fintech space. And in the old days, it took like maybe they needed to be a registered investment advisor, I forget what, but they had to have a certain sort of financial institution certification process you have to go through. So that takes about a year and a half. And so with them, it took even longer. It took like 2 years. And I was like, dude, why is this taking so long? And they said, well, we knew this guy that was the CEO of this company, it was this fintech. And he told us instead of going through the registration process, it was to become a broker. Okay. He said, instead of going through the registration process, you buy a small brokerage and then you transfer the license. It only takes 6 months. Well, that was true until the government figured out everybody was doing it. And all of a sudden put those people under a magnifying glass. And instead of taking 6 months, it took 2 years. So they would have been better off with the old fashioned process. So secrets don't last. Yeah. As soon as it starts getting spread around, it's like, I hate it when I like to maximize credit card points. I know it's silly, but I made $1.25 million credit card points last year just on taking New American Expresses. But there used to be a hack where you could order on those stupid silver dollars from the government that they made that looked like quarters by the box. Like $500 worth in a box. And the mint was required to send them to you at no cost. So you could buy $500 worth of dollar coins for $500. So if you wanted to rack up credit card points, you just buy $2,000 at a time, take them to the bank, drop them in your account. And people did this. But then they started tweeting about it. And guess what? That doesn't work anymore. So like when you find a fancy secret for doing something, particularly as an entrepreneur, don't tell anyone.
Yeah, keep it to
I'm not
yourself.
a big fan of like secretism. I think that bottom line, cooperation is better. Talk about what you're doing, brag about what you're doing, but don't brag about the hack you discovered that's really helping you grow your business until everybody else figures it out on their own. And then you can be the one that talks about the fact that you were the first person to ever do it if you want.
Yeah. That's funny. We have sort of a situation like that right now, and that we're keeping under wraps for the same. Like, I'm glad you're saying that, because that's we were struggling with that.
I don't share one company's secret with another company that can be competitive, but where I find methodologies that are working, certainly if I'm trying to help an entrepreneur break through in a certain area, I'll talk to them about things that have worked in other areas. There was I think it was Josh Koppelman that was explaining once sort of the value of being a board member and an investor. It looks like this. Your entrepreneurial experience, on a scale that looks like this is quite high to start with. But over time, that value to the entrepreneur is going to go down because there's only so many stories I have. I might have spent 25 years as an entrepreneur, but 25 years is an infinity. But your experience with other companies starts low and then it goes like this. So investors should be a resource to you in a lot of different ways. And one of those ways should be keeping current on what's happening in the world, whether that's fundraising or entrepreneurial hacks, and help you get ahead of things where you have, in essence, just another part of your business out there. I'm an unpaid employee in that way, whether it's business development, to make introductions, or everything else. So.
Amazing. So Ben, tell our audience a little bit about what Tenacity looks for, right? Kind of your vision for Tenacity, and then maybe a little bit, we don't have to go deep because anyone could kind of look it up on your stuff, but the high level process of going through that.
Well, in fairness, it's hard for them to figure anything out because we don't have a website. Yeah. We do have a LinkedIn page, but sometimes people are like, oh, I read up on you. I was like, okay. Yeah, I was looking at your website and I'm like, yeah, no, pass. You're not. You clearly didn't do enough work. Yes, there's another company called Tenacity Venture Capital in India.
In India, right.
You can look at me. I'm a solo GP.
Yeah.
Does any of this look like I'm in India? So no. But I am easy to figure out if you've watched any conversation like this I've ever had. First of all, what am I looking for? I need 5 things to make an investment. People, a great idea, a huge market. I don't fund phenomenal people with bad ideas. I don't fund phenomenal people with good ideas in small markets. I need it all. I've tried funding phenomenal people with ideas I didn't like. Hasn't worked out for me. Mike Maples has made a lot of money on pivots. I have not. So I got to stick to what I know. And 18 years in, what I know is I need smart people that have great ideas in big markets. The other pithy little saying I like to use is I want entrepreneurs that make me say, wow. When I look back at my biggest successes, it was wow from minute one. Lending Club was like the second investment I ever made. I was driving to work maybe 1 week into my job, running this equity practice for big venture debt shop, that early days seed fund. And he was on the local AM radio station. And I was like, wow, What a great idea. And then it took like a month or two just to track him down and get a meeting with him. And then it took another 2 or 3 months to do the work to convince myself to write this big check. But like when things have worked out, it doesn't mean just because I say, wow, they worked out. I've had things where I said, wow, and they went to zero, or I got back 3 cents on the dollar. But I'm remembering one where I literally got back 3 cents on the dollar. But I need to say wow in the beginning, or I'm not spending more time on it. 2 years ago, when we were counting, we saw 8,000 pitches and we funded 3. But a lot of those were online demo days, which became newly legal within sort of the COVID environment. And I thought, oh, wow, this is great. Look at all these companies I can see. But it turns out all my companies come on my network anyway. So last year I saw more like 1,000 to 2,000 companies, but that came from traveling a sickening amount and meeting people in person. And once again, I funded 3. So, the conversion rate is exceptionally low. The only way I can get through that many pitches, and some of them are a minute, some are 3 minutes, some of them are an hour, some are over lunch, is I pass during the meeting if it's not a fit. If you're not a fit for me, I'm going to tell you immediately. I will always say to entrepreneurs in terms of process, I cannot get to yes in one meeting. I can get to no in one meeting. And if I do, I'll tell you as soon as I'm there, or I can get to, I want to spend more time with you. So let's say I get to, I want to spend more time with you. And that happens maybe 10 times a year, maybe less, maybe more. I don't know. I should count. So then it's just spending as much time as I possibly can with the entrepreneur, doing whatever diligence I can. I'll give you an example. I flew down to Mexico City, was having, and this is a very common way to get deal flow, having coffee with a local investor. He mentioned a deal that was in process. I said, introduce me. I met them the next day. I liked what I heard. I wanted to spend more time. So the next day I bought them lunch. I followed up with people locally. I just talked to them again today. And I said, okay, well, I'm thinking about this or that. This is where I would end up. It's not an offer, but the financial terms would seem like this, which are a little different than what they're looking for. But I'd want to talk to your prior investor. I'd want to talk to the guy that introduced me to you, who's considering doing this. He did a bunch of diligence. I talked to somebody else that knows the company. This was a great, a reference where they said the CFO of a major hot startup in LATAM left her job to be their CFO. And he said when he talked to her, she said it was because the co-founder was the single best executive she has ever worked with. I love hearing. So, you want exceptional teams. My fund is called Tenacity for a reason. You want to know they've got the to fight through. Being an entrepreneur is the hardest job in the world if you're not a first responder. So my process is pretty time intensive. The more time I can spend with you, the better. But I'm flexible. So as an example, there were 2 deals I've worked on that both went the same way. One was a very hard to get access to deal that I wanted to win. The other one was more I was just evaluating it.
Right.
The one that I took me 6 months to get my first meeting, but I needed more time than that. I'm worried I'm not getting the time. So we played pickleball at my house. Then we had lunch. Then we had whiskey in the fire pit and had a long conversation. So I can get a lot of time. Sometimes I don't have a lot of days to get a lot of time. That decision had to be made in like a week, but I probably got 6 hours out of the first session in a lot of different environments, and then more time, and then I went into the office and met everybody there and looked around I'm not a dart thrower. 3 deals in each of the last 2 years. I mean, come on, that's crazy. That's lower than I want to be, but I'm not going to change my pace for any reason other than the company quality is exceptionally high.
Right. So you do more deals if they met those criteria. The problem for you is finding them to fit all those.
Year 1, I did 9. Year 2, I did 6. Year 3, I did 3. Year 4, I did 3. So clearly I can do more. I did 9 in a year. And I'm very happy with the portfolio. They're a phenomenal group of founders. But, so I've always believed that there are 2 huge mistakes made in venture. One is greed for fees. This is where people just get greedy for those fees and they want more, so they get bigger AUM. There are people out there that it's a very crass term, just nothing but AUM whores. All they want is more money on the top to get their piece of the action on the bottom. You give those fees back if you get into carry. The only way you get to keep those fees is if you lose money. So, and I get some of these funds are so big, it's going to take so long, it's irrelevant. You'll probably be dead by the time your funds start to return a lot of these fees. If you're in the multi-billion-dollar situation, I'm thinking NEA is a smart, logical, highly liquid fund that does a good job. I'm not talking about NEA. I'm talking about another fund I won't name. Anyway, so that happens a lot. That's a huge problem because returns are in many ways driven by the size of the fund. If you look at the 2 best venture firms in the world, Benchmark and Sequoia Venture, they've both kept the funds tight, 400, 500 million. They've got the opportunity to take a stunning amount of capital, but in Benchmark's case, they don't. They did $1 billion fund and it sucked. So they changed it back. In Sequoia's case, they have all kinds of other vehicles they're going to have you in. International and India and China and growth and this whatever. Fine. But venture, that's the business that I really have a lot of respect for. So by keeping it tight, you can get really material returns in terms of multiples, and then you're giving all those fees back. So why do you care? The second flaw is lowering the bar because you're worried about pace. And one of the reasons you're worried about pace is tied to the first one. So when you're in a fund, but you're either raising or finished raising a second fund, you can't deploy that money and therefore get your fees until you're done deploying this money. So all of a sudden, these partners start to say, ooh, we better deploy that money so we can get to the next honeypot. Not good. Because once you lower the bar, nothing but problems. We all have to get lucky, but you get a lot luckier when you keep the bar high and you work with phenomenal founders. Luck is the combination of serendipity and hard work meeting one day. And luck is not throwing darts. Luck is not spray and pray. Spray and pray does not work. The data on it is terrifically bad. There's like one guy I know that's done well with spray and pray, and it's not the one you think. The one you've heard of, who got Google and Facebook, delivered like a 1x fund. How bad does everything else you have to have done have to be to have Google and Facebook and deliver less than a 2x fund? I mean, that's a stunning statement. That tells you. And by the way, let's say you want to follow in that person's footsteps, and you can do it too. All you need is Facebook.
Right.
You're getting Facebook? You know how little of Facebook he got?
Yeah.
Like this much.
Right.
You get 0. Dude, if you're the third most influential spray and prayer, Hippo is what you're getting. Occasionally it works. You know, Uber worked out for a lot of people, things like that. But it is just, you're playing roulette instead of playing poker. Poker's fine. Poker's a game of skill. Over time, you should win, or backgammon. Roulette, there is no amount of skill that allows you to sit at a roulette table for years on end with two greens and bet red and black.
Yes.
No, or not bet numbers, which is even worse. That's the spray.
It's even worse, right?
Numbers, it all terrible.
Yeah, I totally agree. Ben, I like my head's kind of exploding on some of the things you're talking about. I could talk to you for hours. But tell me about, as you start to do evaluations, and again, you're tied to 300 different other VCs in your network. So you're obviously having these conversations, but how is data AI and automations entering into the equation in your evaluation and the multiples, right, that are happening? Because I know that a lot of people are asking those questions, and you probably have a better viewpoint of that than most.
So, I mean, one, I think AI is dramatically changing the potential form of companies. So let me take a step back. It took me about 18 months of research and time before I made my first generative AI investment. I made old school AI investments 10 years ago. I've been on this, the only board I'm still on, machine learning, neural networks, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
What's different now is that as one of my entrepreneurs made clear to me early on, the one I spent the most time with trying to learn this space, the use of LLMs is the first time software has attacked labor versus just process. So if you think about like the old school, we want to be the system of record pitch, who do you compete with? We compete with Excel. Right? It's usually what people said. But now they compete with people doing jobs. So there's, YC as an example, talked about how this is the fastest growing, biggest cohort, blah, 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 with the smallest number of people, because you need less people. One of my favorite quotes is, you're not at risk of getting fired because AI takes your job. You're at risk of getting fired because somebody that does a better job with AI takes your job. I think the Copilot model is extremely positive. I think the sort of replacement of root work.
Yeah.
So
we call them digital coworkers here, because exactly to your statement. So go ahead. I didn't mean that. Yeah.
Oh, no, I think entrepreneurs should be looking at every possible use of different types of AI tools, and they shouldn't build them. They should just buy them. So use them, try them. If they give you value, great. When I think of my own efforts, it's a little more rudimentary. I'm a solo shop. I like to talk to humans, but I have been using, I signed up for OpenAI's deep research, the $200 a month thing, for 1 month because I was doing diligence, and it's easier to ask it a series of questions and get sort of like when I was at NEA, we had a phenomenal tier of associates. So I'm increasing my activity in LATAM. Okay, Bob, I really need to understand LATAM better. Why don't you tell me total population of Spanish-speaking LATAM, GDP compared to the United States, top 10 fintechs, average valuation, how many of them gotten public, blah, 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 blah. Boom, ChatGPT spews all that stuff out for me. So I don't need a human to go out there and dig through the web, which is the job of a lot of these deep analytical-minded, super smart people that came out of banking and that support general partners at venture firms. Now, I won't pay for that 12 months out of the year because I don't do 12 deals a year once a month. I do 3 deals a year right now. So I will pay for it each month that I need it to use it for that. I am that cheap. But even if I did pay for it 12 months out of the year, $2,400 to have the equivalent of a deep analyst sitting in my pocket, pretty sweet deal. I'm not aware of any human beings in the United States that will work for me for $2,400 to be on call. So I haven't yet found the virtual assistant that I need. I would love if somebody built a company that could really deeply research my emails. This is amazing to me that it doesn't work in AI. I was fundraising for Fund One in 2021. I'm not that organized. I don't know who I talk to. I just want AI. I want to say to AI, hey, go through all my emails from the second half of 2021. I need any individuals I contacted about raising the fund, period. And I cannot find something to do that. If anybody knows it, please DM me on Twitter. But at Ben Narasin.
After we're done, I'll point you somewhere.
Okay, because that would be enormously valuable to me because I suck up so much time just looking and Google search for emails. Terrible. Even though I use email, it's just amazingly bad.
I can't believe Gemini, they haven't got Gemini to do exactly this yet because people will go bananas.
Everything that pops up, I try it, and every time I get let down. So there's still plenty of opportunities. But look, it's sort of like when people ask me, often people say, okay, to finish, you're in a library, we see you like reading. One book. What's the one book I should read as an entrepreneur? And my answer is always the same. Everything or nothing. You either read everything you get your hands on that's remotely relevant because you never know where the next idea is going to come from, or you just don't have the time, so just do your job. It's very hard for an entrepreneur to have the time to do a lot of reading. I am fortunate, post-liquidity, to have some time, but that time boils down to every single day I try to find a 20-minute window to walk across the street to the library and read the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal. And if my window is longer than 20 minutes, to pick some random book off the nonfiction shelf and read a chapter. But realistically, I don't get to read that much anymore. I'd like to. Sometimes there's a book that's so powerful, I do tell my entrepreneurs, this is one you've got to get. One of my founders was asking for help in their sales methodology. And I was like, here's a recommendation. Buy this book for every one of your people and then go back and have a session with them and do a book club and talk about it. Because if you can run your company against this, it's going to be really great. He came back to me later. He's like, it's the single best piece of advice I've ever gotten. And if you can give me that level of advice once every 5 years, or maybe it was 3 years, you will be the single best investor I've ever worked with in my entire life. I was like, great, glad it worked. But, it's same with AI. Like, it's either you're going to spend a lot of time trying all kinds of stuff, or you're not going to spend any time yet. Because here's the counterpoint. Until you know people want what you have and it's working, investing in technology is a waste of your time. Yeah. I am absolutely fine with people sneaker netting it. I don't care if I click a button and you have monkeys running on a treadmill to power the result. What I care about is, does anybody want to click that button? Does anybody want to buy that product? Use a painted door, whatever you want. Figure out whether there's a need for your product, because your belief that there's need is very different than the close to 9 billion people on the planet's decision on whether there's need. And if you're going to tell me you're smarter than the collective hundreds of thousands or millions of people that could potentially buy your product, I think you got a little issue on how smart you actually are. Because that, again, not intelligence, that's wisdom. And you do not know what your customers all want. I don't care how many of them you talk to. Put it live, figure it out, do it as cheaply and quickly as possible, and then code it. So if AI can help you in any stage of that, all the better.
Totally. I love it. I love it. So real quick on the AI, because I want to, when we finish up, I kind of want to turn it back to the VC. But tell me something that Ben does personally with AI today that you think other people might find interesting, especially founders, CEOs.
I think the only thing is that I do use deep research to do the sort of baseline analytics of industry trends or company information. Occasionally I'll try to get to figure out stuff that, like, I'll have a meeting coming up with somebody and when you do 8,000 pitches a year, it's not uncommon. You're like, wait, who introduced us? So I'll put in the email and say, tell me about this person and their address and what their company does. And that's not novel. I think I am not actually I don't Google people before I meet them because oddly, I feel it's slightly intrusive. This goes back to a personal experience I had where someone was like, oh, I love your glasses. I'm like, yeah. And then they started talking about their antiques, right? I'm like, what are you talking about? Right. And then I Googled myself, and there was a website during the bubble when I was running a public company that had taken my picture and my little gold rimmed Obler People's glasses and put them up and said that they were solid gold antiques that I had bought and that I was a collector. I'm like, weird, you guys are making this shit up. But what that told me was, before this person, and by the way, it was at our school, so that's why I thought it was weird. Yeah. Before they met me or before they talked to me, they had gone and Googled me and tried to learn all about me. I'm like, really? Just ask. I'm happy. I want to learn on the fly. I want to hear what you have to say. Yeah. Later, yes, I do in my diligence need to Google you, but it's nicer to have.
I like that approach. And you know why, Ben? Because you don't want to come in with someone's online presence and come in with preconceived notions.
Yes, exactly. Right. And then be wrong. The first time I asked ChatGPT about me, you know what it said? I was a partner at Sequoia. I was like, I wish. Yeah. Everything they said was wrong. I was like, oh, I'm a VC, so you just assume Sequoia. That was a mistake. The companies I invested in were mistakes. I'm like, this is not hard to find information, man. That
Yeah.
was the early days with hallucinations as a problem. But I was like,
Yeah.
well, I'm going to go into Sequoia with this and say, well, ChatGPT tells me I'm a partner here. So
Yeah.
I need to make sure, where's my desk? I'm confused. I don't remember where I was. But I actually have amnesia. But fortunately for me, ChatGPT told me that this is where I work. So I'm here. Please let me know where my business cards are. And I'm not getting my payments. Can I give you my bank information
Yeah,
again?
exactly. Can you direct deposit? Yeah.
But here's a horrific story
Mhm.
about me trusting a human being where I should have trusted something else. I'm not going to use names. We found a company through an accelerator we were excited about. I did personally meet the founder. Very compelling, very slick guy. Slick, but in a good way. Usually slick's a bad term, but it turns out it was a bad term in this case. So the other person in my organization at the time did the diligence before we made the investment. We had made a commitment. I loved the story. I loved everything he said about how he was going to do this. It was a pre-seed. And for anybody that doesn't know what pre-seed is, it's a guy or gal or more than one with PowerPoint slides. Period. That's it. That's what you're funding.
Yeah.
I've been doing that for 18 years. In the end, he drained the bank account to zero in 4 months and pretty much disappeared. Never paid his bills. It's pretty clear he stole the money. So during the process of diligence, the guy told me everything went well and we didn't need to do a background check and blah, blah, blah. So I went back to do the diligence myself because I'm unemployable, but I'm also unable to employ. I'm not a trust but verify. I'm a trust, and that's not useful. So I go back and just type the guy's name in Google. If I go with the autofill, in the top 10 results is a criminal record. If I don't go with the autofill, on the first page is a massive article about suspected fraud. Okay. It's like, that's why I don't have a partner anymore. But I was like, my head's exploding on that one. Now, I'm pretty confident if I just typed it into ChatGPT, I'm going to find a lot of bad stuff. I've never bothered because why do I want to cause myself more grief? It was a small investment, but it still was our mistake. And that cost our LPs money. And that bothers me a great deal.
Yeah. I get that.
It's like that should never happen. And it should never happen now when I have a very competent deep research assistant called ChatGPT.
Yeah, totally agree. Well, I told you before we came on that I usually ask the founders and the CEOs about growth and their biggest challenge. What I'd really rather ask you is what advice would you give to other founders about growth and how they should think about it, especially if they want to get to somebody like you and in your network of, hey, we're going to need funding and we have a great idea, but how should they be thinking about that? And how would you coach them?
So the challenge is growth and velocity of growth. The curve is the crack cocaine addictive substance of venture capital. Now, with the last few years and no liquidity and people being worried about fundraising, everybody's like, we need to see a path to profitability. We need to see you running at default alive. What they don't say is, but we still need to see ridiculously awesome growth. They do. Because without it, you're not getting funded. Look at my smart business that's growing 20% a year that will be profitable in 2 years. What? Good for you, man. Nice lifestyle business. Bye-bye. So without material growth, you're not a target for venture. And there's many reasons for that. We can talk about it. But the problem is you do have to run a logical company, but you still have to grow like crazy because venture is only appropriate to a very tiny subset of businesses. If you look right now at publicly traded SaaS companies, they are trading for about 3.7x revenue at 5% growth to 15 to 17x at about 40% growth. And the biggest are trading for bigger numbers than that. I think the biggest of all is probably NVIDIA, which isn't a SaaS company, but I think they're 47 times forward. Or no, Palantir. Palantir is the one that's a huge number. But here's the thing. If your growth is like this, no one expects that to continue. So if you're growing 300% per annum this year, do I think you're going to be going 300% per annum when you go public? Absolutely not. Right. But if I need you to be growing at 40 to 80% when you go public, well, you better start off at 300. You're not going from 10 to 20 to 30 to 40% growth. Growth does not increase usually. Sometimes it does. It almost always decays. So this is a great place to start. And then it goes like this and this and this, and you get public here. You get to here, nobody's touching you. Those are lifestyle businesses. They can be enormous. There's nothing wrong with lifestyle business. I ran a lifestyle business. I didn't even know that term existed until I got to Silicon Valley. I'm like, and somebody's like, why do I want to do that? I'm going to run a lifestyle business. I'm like, you could make like $5 million a year doing this. You could get to 20 million in revenue, huge margins, take home $5 million. Why is that bad?
Right. Why is that bad?
Yeah, I know it's not. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
But don't raise venture capital for that because you'll get fired later by somebody else that decides that this could be bigger and they want to put somebody this high growth mindset in. Growth is super critical. This is why it's very, very, very hard to invest in Europe and the UK. I'm abandoning them, but Glad AM, awesome. It's just, that hyper growth mindset. Like my friends, Reid Hoffman and Chris Yee have a fund called Blitzscaling, and it's all about creating that hyper growth mindset. And that is just so critical. One way to think about it, and I remember this I've heard it twice. I heard it in the bubble from Halsey Minor, who grew CNET, and I've heard it recently from one of my founders that's getting pretty dangerously close to cash out. I can hit a wall at 100 miles an hour or 500 miles an hour. I'm dead either way. But at 500 miles an hour, I might actually win the race. That's the reality of these businesses.
Wow.
Zero is zero no matter what. But slow growers aren't going to turn into future public companies.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, you're 100% right about that. But you're right. And it's also okay to admit if you're a lifestyle business, if you're growing at 20 to 30% a year, you're fine, right?
I don't need to, here's my point of view on this. I've spent an enormous amount of time thinking about this. What is critical to an entrepreneur is not what they want. It's what they need. The difference between want and need is fundamental because here's the challenge. And I'm always trying to figure this out. I'll use a super simplistic, vapid example. Let's say you grow up in Littletown, Iowa, and the biggest house on the hill with the richest family was a family that made $40 million in the wheat business. I don't know. And they were just the kings of that community. And you cared. That was a big deal to you. If you were ever able to move home and buy that house with $50 million in your bank, you would be the biggest of the big in Littletown, Iowa. And your parents would be so proud. And that girl that didn't date you in high school would be so regretful. If that's what you need to consider yourself a success, then when that offer is given to you, you will take it. Because the only way you're going to build a multi-billion-dollar business is to refuse to take that offer. Nobody has ever built a multi-billion-dollar business that didn't have the opportunity to sell for millions, tens of millions, and hundreds of millions. But if the need is to get to another level for reasons that might have nothing to do with money, then you can fight through. It doesn't mean you'll make it, but it means you'll try. And I only want to take shots on people that are trying for that. And those are the businesses I want to back. I can only do so many. I have no issue with the guy that wants to make the 40 or 50 and go home.
Yeah.
I just can't fund him or her because that is not, I can only do so many companies. I can only be helpful to so many people. Why wouldn't I want to fund future Olympic gold medalists instead of, I'm not a sports guy, but whatever, I don't know, college competitive athletes.
Right. And so when you do the 2,000 to 8,000 a year, right? And the ones you don't take, do they wind up going out are there other people in the 300 in the investment pool that they're better fit for, or do you guys all have kind of similar criteria?
I think we do. I think it's, someone just yesterday was asking me about, well, tell me about you've been doing this for 18 years. What were the big ones you missed? And I literally can think, I'm not saying I'm flawless. Yeah. It's funny. My wife keeps saying I'm a confident person. So she's like, why are you always right? What are you talking about? It's like, you're always right. You're so confident. You're right. You're always right. You have to be right. It has to be your way. I was like, well, obviously I'm not always right. That would be impossible. But if we look at the data, you'll see that I usually am, which she hates. She hates when I tell that story. But I'm like, yes, I've been wrong. But the number of times I've been right far outstrips it as a percentage. So far, the one I can remember that I whiffed 100% on was Wix. I was one of the first people to meet them. They came over from Israel. And my friend who was an Israeli introduced me. And I was like, well, this is a website builder? Yes. How much have you spent to build this website builder? $8 million. What's your revenue? We don't have revenue yet. Why would anybody care? It was like, there are so many website builders. I did not understand how bad those were because I had used them in the past when I was building my web business. And I was like, I do not understand why anybody would ever fund this. Well, Benchmark funded it. It's a multi-billion-dollar public company. So clearly I missed that one. There is an importance to the prepared mind in this industry, and that was not a place I had spent any time preparing. I'm sure there are others, but it is more often the case that people come back to me later and tell me, thank you for being honest, because I was an entrepreneur for a long time and nobody helped me by glad handing me and telling me it's all good.
Right.
The people that were useful to me that didn't give me money were honest and often brutal. Now, I'm trying not to be a dick, and I'll try to prepare them like, look, I was an entrepreneur a lot longer than I've been an investor. I have no filter. I'm going to tell you what I think is an entrepreneur. And I have had multiple instances. I know I've pissed off at least 3 people, which means I've probably pissed off 30. But I've had a lot more instances where people come to me later like, oh my God, you were so helpful. I'm like, but I passed and told you it was going to be a crushing down round. He's like, yeah, but you were right. And if we'd listened to you earlier, we would have spent 6 months less, not wasted on fundraising, because that's exactly
absolutely.
What
absolutely.
So you called it radical candor. I mean, I just call it being honest with people. And I would admit that I am not great at packaging it. Like I probably come off as facetious sometimes. I probably come off as people might be like, that guy is just a dick. But I'm just listen to the words. Someone once said to me, I was giving an entrepreneur some advice and being, like, hey, don't take this the wrong way. I just want to tell you what I really, really think here. And hopefully it's useful to you. And afterwards, the guy turned to me, he's like, have you never heard of the shit sandwich? I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, well, you give him a compliment, then you tell him the truth, then you give him a compliment. I'm like, who has time for that?
Right.
You waste a bunch of time with, man, you are one handsome man. I really love that sweater. It's great. But I got to tell you, you suck for the following 7 reasons. But in addition, that orange polo shirt, wow, I love it. So keep on with the clothing, but all the rest of the stuff, dump all of that and never do it again because you're terrible at it. But again, handsome man, dude. Yeah. What is that for? What is the point? I know I'm on some spectrum somewhere where maybe I would love it if AI could run the world in some ways, because I get that we have to filter for some sort of prejudices that are built in from historic data, but like that, it doesn't care. It's just going to give you the answer. Just give me the answer. If there's no hallucinations and I want an answer to a problem, I'd love to ask it and have it say, here's the solution.
Remind me after this. I'm going to send you. So Kim Mahan from Max Potential sent me what she called the prompt that changed her life. And I would love for you to tweak it, right, for the way you talked it, because I think what you do is the best advice, because if you're an entrepreneur and you don't want that feedback, you're not a real entrepreneur. Because
if you are too thin-skinned to hear a hard truth just because the person didn't package it well, I'm not sitting there going, you're a piece of garbage and I hate your idea.
Right. You're not tearing people down. Yeah.
These are the issues I see in the business. I might be wrong, but I've got a lot of experience that I'm using to look at these lenses of mine to tell you why I'm thinking this. If that's going to, you remember when I said I know I've pissed off 3 people? One of them was a personal friend, an older guy I used to play tennis with in this group. And he pitched me his business and I gave him some, what I thought was thoughtful but hard advice. And about a year later, I was on an email chain with him about something and I responded, I'd like to do it. He said, oh, we'd love to have you. But I did want to tell you that when I pitched you my business, you gave me some honest and accurate advice, but the method in which you gave it to me was very demeaning and insulting and and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, are you kidding me?
Right.
You told me honest and accurate, but my style of presentation was demeaning, and that was a year ago?
Right. And he's been friends with you, right? So he should know you even better than most people that you're just...
Yeah. Well, I mean, when you're social friends, they don't see that side of you. My social me is very different than the business me, apparently.
Yeah.
But I was like, you will never succeed as an entrepreneur. I do hang on to things, so it's probably a little bit unfair, but like a year late, you didn't just say something then? Like, dude, you hung on to that?
Right.
So, I mean, I don't know. You got to have such thick skin to be a founder. You got to wake up every morning expecting to get hit in the face with that virtual sledgehammer and just keep going. Yeah. Chew glass, run through walls, all the things people say. That's your life. Your life is suck. Your life is welcome to the suck. And if you stay in it long enough, maybe you come out the other side with glory.
Yeah.
Okay. So having an illusion that it's something else, that's what we call a wantrepreneur, not an entrepreneur.
Totally agree. And a lot of us have played wantrepreneur too long, and you need that. Right? Yeah. Ben,
I believe that 25 years of entrepreneurship is such a benefit to me. One, it allowed me to buy this house. It allowed me to live in Silicon Valley without having to work. But it is possible to snow me, the one guy that defrauded us, I met him. So, but I think it is exceptionally hard for you to talk me into believing you have what it takes to be an entrepreneur if you don't. I have lived that life for 25 years. That was nothing but pain and hardship and valley of death and constant threat of going under. Like, I don't think that part you can get past me on. Now, maybe I'll be proven wrong today. I do remember the first time a founder ever gave up. And it was like mind-blowing to me that he would do so. Yeah. But first, I didn't notice that part. It's funny. I came home from, I'll make it fast. So I came home one day. It took me 3 years before I had my first entrepreneur fail in my entire portfolio. And I was always worried I wasn't taking enough risk. Anyway, I come home one day, I'm sort of bummed out. My wife's like, what's wrong? I was like, oh, I had my first company go down. She's like, oh, what happened? I said, well, it's been like a year. It's been really, really hard. The guy was way ahead of the market and he finally just couldn't do it anymore. She's like, a year? Like, you're right. God damn it. That mother effer gave up. And I went from feeling bad for the entrepreneur to being absolutely livid.
Yeah.
That's the one I got 3 cents on the dollar back on, by the way. So just that tells you something. He gave me back 3 cents on the dollar. He gave up at the very, very end of his money, but not the end of his money. I've seen entrepreneurs go 6 months past the end of their money. You will, if there's one thing I will say to anybody considering being an entrepreneur, if giving up or failing is one of the possibilities in your mind, just don't bother.
Yeah.
You've already got a weakness in you that you're not going to get past. You do not allow that to exist in the universe you work in if you want to be an entrepreneur.
100%.
Because if you do, think about it like being a Navy SEAL. If the possibility of ringing the bell is a possibility for you, you will ring that bell one day.
Yeah.
Same thing. And so just
a great analogy. Yep.
Get a great job, hide in the corner, do your work from home bullshit, do your work-life balance, because none of that stuff works for an entrepreneur. Take your 9-to-5 job at IBM and take them a paycheck.
Yep. 100% agreed. This has been just phenomenal, Ben. This is the tried and true tough advice that every entrepreneur needs to hear. And it's in the best of intentions. Like, you're trying to tell people, hey, look, I've done it and I see 8,000 pitches a year. It's not hard to figure out after you see that. You have a different perspective. For everybody watching this, if you're not taking this to heart, right, then honestly, I don't know how to help you, because you're exactly right.
Let's end on a positive, though.
Yeah.
If you're considering being an entrepreneur and you're making that decision, and let's say that if you are going to make that decision, you are diving all the way into the deep end. Mm-hmm. You are diving off the boat of safety into the ocean. And if you don't swim to the nearest shore, which could be hundreds of miles away, you will die. If you get that and you still want to do it, there is no better experience, because even if you fail, the learnings you have are priceless. I had a founder once I backed in the seed. I helped him with his A, helped him with his B, I helped him with his C. After raising an enormous amount of money and 8 years of work, it failed to zero. I lost all my money. I used to have on my wall a receipt for $142 thank you lunch that he bought me as the only return on my $150,000 personal investment. Just as a reminder, it doesn't matter how well it goes, it's never de-risked. And I said to him, like, wow, that's what do you think of it when you think back on it? Do you have regrets? Because he had asked me for one piece of advice. I wondered if he regretted. He said, I don't regret it at all. I came of age as an entrepreneur. There's no way I could ever have learned this much if I had 10 times the time in another business. Yeah. So the value of entrepreneurship, even if you do not succeed, is exceptionally high, and it should be very high to your resume. Although I do think it's harder for people to evaluate than maybe I believe. Yeah. But you just learn so much. There is so much reward. When it works well, that reward is financial, but not always. But there's always reward. You're going to mature. Imagine going into a company. I used IBM. My dad used to work at IBM. I don't know how many people were there. Hundreds of thousands. Yeah. You come in here, and you move to here, and you move to here, and you move to here. You come in as an entrepreneur, you start here, and then you grow in your expertise. And if, even an acqui-hire, you end up coming into the company that buys you here, not here, where you would have otherwise, that's a benefit if the company gets bought. I mean, if it doesn't work out in entrepreneurship, in an entrepreneurial journey, then, an acqui-hire is an alternative. The best firms will try to help you land the plane. They know they're not getting any money back, but we want you to have a future. We would rather you go forward. If you have a job and I get 0 cents back on the dollar, I won't love the financial loss, but that's better than you just shutting it down and moving on. So I'm okay. Okay is the wrong word, but when I was at NEA, we would spend an enormous amount of time on deals we knew we were not going to get any money back on or make pennies on the dollar, because we'd rather see those companies land and have another life as individual contributors to the businesses that they build.
Great. I love it. Great stories. Honestly, Ben, thank you. Thank you for sharing time with us. And for everybody out there that is right around the corner from actually looking at VC, Ben, I know that you kind of do it through referrals, but I know that someone can look at how would they get in contact with you if they need to?
I look at everything. So if you send me a message on LinkedIn, I'm going to read it. If you send me a DM on Twitter, I'm going to look at that too. I look at all of it. And the only thing I will say is, just a tip. Before you send me a message on LinkedIn, read my profile picture. It says very simply, one line elevator pitch and ARR. I read all. No security, med tech, or crypto. But I'll tell you, 90% of what I get on LinkedIn is 8 paragraphs long, and half of them are security, med tech, or crypto. I think somebody uses a search engine that says, oh, crypto, here's all the names. And I'm like, did you not look? Do the work, do the research to actually look at least when someone says, oh, I've been following Tenacity, blah, 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 and I love your website. It's like, okay, I know you're lying. Thank you for making that up. Right. You have a spam bot that you're using. It doesn't take an enormous amount of work. I make it easy. There's a picture, right? The title, not even that. It's one line under my picture and name. I mean,
I saw it. I agree. Yeah, I saw it. It's very simple.
If you didn't see it, you never actually looked at my profile, which tells me a lot about how much time you put in to this. We, after researching you in great depth, think you'd be a perfect fit for our company that does medtech, security, and crypto. And here's 18 paragraphs to read. Like, I, by the way, if you do send me that, if you're just so clueless that you decide to just piss me off, mess with me, whatever, I'm just going to send you back a picture of my profile picture with a circle around those words.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. Ben, absolute delight. Thank you so much. I think as this thing grows, we'll definitely have to invite you back and do a catch up, later in the year or next year, because it's honestly one of my favorite episodes we've done. And just your wisdom and knowledge is worth every minute we spend with you. So thank you.
Hey, I appreciate you having me on. I'll look forward to seeing it when it comes out, and we'll push it out on social.
Absolutely. Well, thanks. This wraps up this episode of the Future Proof Podcast. Thanks to Ben, and thank you to everybody for watching.
If you're ready to embrace change and lead with innovation, be sure to subscribe and never miss an episode. Thanks for tuning in to the Future Proof Podcast.